Some stories disappear, some are erased, and some are waiting to be uncovered. The Dark Bureau.
In the rarefied air of skyscraper offices, behind polished glass and artfully arranged conference tables, a different form of power circulates. A pen glides across thick legal paper, not simply authorizing transactions, but orchestrating the flow of money that exists in the grey space between order and disorder. A handshake between professionals. A whisper of confidentiality. These are the first gates through which billions in illicit wealth quietly pass, never setting off the alarms built for cruder crimes. What truly separates the upright world of legal commerce from the universe of global corruption isn't always the law itself, but the ability to make the murky look pristine. Modern money laundering rarely resembles the cinematic image of briefcases packed with cash or furtive nighttime exchanges. Instead, dirty money enters the legitimate system disguised as legal work. Documents stamped and sealed. Multi-page contracts written in specialized language. Corporations born with mere paper and keystrokes. This is the terrain on which attorneys, bound by ethical codes, now sometimes become the sophisticated brokers of concealment. Their fingerprints are not left on guns or duffel bags, but on corporate charters, registration filings, and opaque trust documents. The very instruments of law become the tunnelling machines of secrecy. Consider this: a single shell company, registered in Delaware in minutes by a junior associate, obscures the link between a politician's bribes and a luxury condo in London. An anonymous trust, routed through the city's old-line solicitors, transfers millions obtained from environmental crimes to a safe account in Zurich. The privilege of confidentiality, originally crafted to protect the rights of the vulnerable, becomes, in inventive hands, a high wall that insulates the origins of this capital from scrutiny by banks or law enforcement. When law is engineered for concealment, not justice, everything appears correct on the surface. Beneath it, the corrosive work is done by professionals wearing their best suits. This isn't about isolated loopholes or fringe players. It's about an entire system, institutionalized through centuries of legal evolution, that generates as much as 2 trillion in illicit flows each year, according to conservative estimates. Law firms, accountants, formation agents, private wealth advisors, all participating in a network where plausible deniability is both product and shield. Banks may be compelled to report suspicious activity, but lawyers often operate in the shadows of privilege, using confidentiality as a tool to avoid inconvenient questions. In this game, trust is less a virtue and more a valuable currency, one banked, sold and traded by the world's most influential intermediaries. The system's sophistication is mind-bending. A client seeking to hide the proceeds of corruption might employ a respected firm in New York, which engages a British intermediary specializing in offshore structures. That intermediary registers a Swiss mailbox company, layering ownership through nominee directors and shelf corporations. At every stage, each actor follows their own version of the rules, creating an invisible, borderless pipeline for illicit fortunes. The paper trail, when visible at all, only verifies that the rules of secrecy have been expertly obeyed. The patterns repeat globally. High-risk clients are sanitized through legitimate legal channels, their assets passing through labyrinthine holding companies, trusts, and partnerships. A few filings, perhaps a strategic misdirection or two in the ownership registers, and illegal money is transformed into clean capital, indistinguishably flowing through the veins of global commerce. At the end, the ultimate beneficiary is buried beneath dozens of layers, hidden by legal innovation rather than direct deception. In this world, the conception of risk itself is distorted. Risk doesn't mean breaking the law. It means getting caught not concealing well enough. What motivates this sector isn't just greed, but the relentless competition that drives the world's top law and accounting firms. The most lucrative clients can shop for specialists who promise to outmaneuver regulators and offer the best forms of legal camouflage. Reputation for discretion becomes a commodity. In key jurisdictions, New York, London, Zurich, the Cayman Islands, the regulatory expectations differ, but the race is the same. Provide the strongest secrecy, charge a premium, and build a client base that prizes creative loopholes. Even jurisdictions that attempt to tighten oversight find elite actors moving their business elsewhere, sparking chains of competitive deregulation. A secrecy arms race, in effect, where losing market share is an existential threat for international firms. Every new rule or tightening of compliance simply pushes the innovation further. If the United States cracks down on undisclosed beneficial ownership, business shifts to foreign trusts and foreign attorneys. If Switzerland enhances transparency, rival hubs step forward, eager to absorb the migrating funds. Each regulatory patchwork is met by new tactics: nominee services, professional intermediaries who act as frontmen, trust companies in archipelagos and city centres, all capitalising on fragmented rule sets. As a result, global flows rarely slow. They simply change shape and destination. For investigators, finding the truth behind these arrangements is an uphill battle. The moment a law enforcement official issues a subpoena or launches an inquiry, confidentiality provisions are invoked, sometimes as an ethical obligation, sometimes as calculated delay. Prosecutors find themselves faced not only with reluctant witnesses, but with armies of seasoned litigators whose strategic goal is to create confusion, stall proceedings, and ensure the statute of limitations works in their client's favour. Documentary evidence, if it exists, is almost always offshore, stranded in a web of mutually uncooperative jurisdictions. Even in the rare event that an asset seizure is attempted, the legal counterattack is immediate and unrelenting. The dynamic feeds on its own success. For every high-profile bust splashed across the press, there are hundreds of cases quietly buried by legal process, technicalities, and fractured jurisdiction. Regulators, even those committed to reform, are often under-resourced and up against well-heeled adversaries who have helped write the very rules they must enforce. Compliance officers frequently treat risk management as a procedural checkbox, not a substance-driven responsibility. Due diligence policies are satisfied by box-ticking exercises or superficial scans. Identity documents, references, and source of funds statements can be forged or taken at face value. The appearance of compliance masks the reality of facilitation. Across the institutional spectrum, the legal sector often portrays itself as a mere conduit, facilitators, not gatekeepers. This is a structural ambiguity, enabling professionals to skirt the line between advocacy and complicity. Law firms justify their roles by emphasising client advocacy, ethical duties, and the presumption of innocence. Yet built into this defence is an awareness that business survival depends on not asking too many questions. In the end, the calculus is clear. The commercial incentives to keep high-risk clients significantly outweigh the reputational or legal risks of being labelled an enabler. These structural problems are not lost on policymakers and reform advocates. The United States, facing mounting evidence of abuse, passed the Corporate Transparency Act, designed to peel away the veil of anonymous entities. While a step forward, the law left ample room for exemptions. Entire categories of companies, certain trusts, and legacy entities are still shielded. The United Kingdom, recently embarrassed by the spotlight on Russian money inflows, has tried to push for more accountability from its legal and accounting sector. Switzerland, a historic stronghold of banking secrecy, has implemented modest reforms while continuing to host trust companies that act with near total impunity. Each jurisdiction attempts reform, but expert resistance, legal challenges, lobbying, the quiet rewriting of rules ensures that new barriers quickly become yesterday's obstacles. The rare rupture in this fortress comes not from official oversight, but from whistleblowers and investigative journalists. Revelations such as the Panama Papers, offshore leaks, and Paradise Papers have peeled away the layers for brief moments. Their findings shock. Tens of thousands of previously unknown companies, billions of dollars in transactions routed through some of the most prestigious firms on Earth. The investigations expose a system in which legal and financial professionals do not simply permit wrongdoing. They design the machinery for it, integrating it seamlessly into the global economy. These leaks catalyze outrage and short-lived political will, but rarely force systemic change. The system's resilience comes from its design as much as its secrecy. What underpins this resilience is a profound, sometimes cynical, contradiction at the heart of modern statecraft. Governments that denounce financial crime on the world stage also depend on the same law firms for treaty negotiations, legislative drafting, and regulatory enforcement. Laws intended to restore integrity are shaped or diluted by the hands of those charged with dismantling abuse. Regulators routinely hire from the industry they are meant to monitor, further diffusing accountability and solidifying elite networks. The deliberate blurring of the line between enabler and reformer is not an oversight. It is often a structural feature. The consequences of these patterns ripple far beyond the abstract world of balance sheets and legal filings. When public officials embezzle funds destined for schools or hospitals, those resources pass through global law firms and re-emerge as luxury real estate, art, or influence. Drug traffickers launder profits, which are then reinvested into political corruption, land grabbing, or vote-buying schemes. Professional shields meant to protect the innocent instead protect secrecy, silencing whistleblowers and chilling investigative journalism. In many countries, the sense of impunity engendered by professional secrecy perpetuates cycles of instability, lost trust, and economic inequality. When institutional responses do occur, enforcement actions, disciplinary hearings, or regulatory fines, they are often superficial in relation to the profits earned. A law firm exposed for facilitating money laundering may pay a fine that represents a fraction of a single lucrative deal, and its senior partners, shielded by complex governance structures, rarely face lasting professional consequences. Disciplinary panels fragment responsibility, focusing on individual lawyers or compliance officers rather than the systemic culture of enablement. In most cases, institutional memory is short. The headlines fade, new staff members are hired, and the lesson learned is not to reform, but simply to build stronger walls and subtler structures. Yet it is not inevitable that this cycle continues unbroken. Structural analysis reveals the incentives embedded within the very design of legal practice: billable hours, client retention, reputation, which must evolve if the dark side of the profession is to be addressed. It requires a fundamental shift, recognizing that legal and financial enablers are not neutral actors, but often the architects of inequity. Effective reform would mean closing, not just narrowing, legal grey zones upon which billions in illicit money depend. This would also demand robust international cooperation, consistent enforcement, the dismantling of professional privilege in matters of public interest, and broader cultural changes within legal and business education. Until then, the machinery grinds on. The world sees the visible tip: court verdicts, confiscated assets, exposés, but behind every document, every shell company, every transaction, there is a deliberate engineering of uncertainty. The global industry of secrecy thrives precisely because it can hide within public view, protected by the trust the law still commands. Each layer of anonymity, each redacted file, is one more reminder. Protection for some may mean vulnerability for all. As new generations of professionals enter the field, the question remains: will they continue to perfect the art of concealment, or reclaim the profession in service of genuine justice. In the end, the search for answers lies in the shadows cast by the very hands sworn to uphold the law.